Rand extending its weakness this morning, so after trading to 689 yesterday, up at 693 this morning, and it looks like it's on a one-way road at this stage.
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. It does seem as though the Rand bears are kind of back in charge here, and the bias, I think, remains in favour of extended Rand weakness. I think there's a distinct possibility that we're going to breach that 7 Rand handle to the top side, and I say that because commodity prices are fairly vulnerable, and added to the equation, we've seen some selling in the equity market. So risk off and softer commodity prices, an environment where the dollar's enjoying a bit of a recovery, doesn't bode well for our Rand.
At the same time, we've seen that euro weakening quite sharply against the dollar as well. So that's at 142 this morning. And if you think back about 10 days, we had that euro heading for 150 against the greenback. So for once, the Rand-euro correlation is intact.
I think, Stephen, we've got to really take a look back and just see what's been happening with these commodity prices and euro-dollar. And it's quite clear that we've seen a very high correlation between the two. And that's saying to me that the dollar was selling off as people were using low interest rates in the States to borrow funds and to buy commodities. So there was a lot of speculative money, and I think there still is a lot of speculative money in these commodity prices. I think the current levels that we find ourselves with oil, gold and platinum, fundamentally it's very difficult to justify those highs. So as oil prices have come off, we've seen possibly some of those guys liquidate some of those euro-dollar positions, and that could very well just continue, because I think in a lot of these instances we've got very stretched positions in the market. People have been very bearish about the dollar, very bullish about commodities, very bullish about emerging markets for a number of quarters now. So when the whole market is one way, the risk of the uncoil becomes that much more dramatic, and I think we've got to be very mindful that we could see more weakness coming through in the emerging markets and commodities if this dollar continues to claw back.
Would you expect any response from the Rand to the MPC today, given that it's likely that the repo rate will be left at 5.5%? Or do you think the Rand could move on the tone of that statement coming out of the Reserve Bank?
Unless the MPC comes out with an exceptionally hawkish tone this afternoon, I don't think that's going to be, it's very difficult to find a catalyst for what's going to turn this weaker Rand around. I think that our view is that the MPC statement will be pretty consistent with what we saw in the previous statement. Keeping the door open for tightening further down the line, but also vigilant of what's happening on the growth front, the output gap, etc. We saw those disappointing employment figures a couple of weeks ago, and really the South African consumer and the economy as a whole is still relatively fragile. So we remain of the opinion that the South African economy just can't withstand an interest rate hike for the rest of this year, and possibly we'll only get that first hike coming through in the first quarter of next year. So I don't think the MPC is going to have a material influence on the Rand unless the Reserve Bank surprises us, as I say, with a very hawkish statement.